Hello and good evening. I have a feeling people are still watching my last video and some people are being offended by it. It's not my intent. I'm just trying to be honest. If you haven't watched my previous video, don't worry about it because we're here to talk about Joel 3. This is going to round out our study of the book of Joel, and I am wide awake and wanting to talk about Bible study. So that is what I am going to do. Just want to make sure I'm live and people can hear me before I start. Hello and good evening. Hi, Barry. Long time no see. Nice to see you. Can you hear me? All right. Hello and welcome. Just wanted to give this a couple of minutes. Got some very, very cool content to go through tonight. Before I get started, I want to make note if... Cool. Well, it's nice to see you. Haven't seen your name in a hot minute, so very nice to see you. Hi, Teteleste. All right, we're going to get started. So Joel 3, I know this is impromptu, but I wanted to do this live. I don't know how long it's going to be, and my pre-recording software only gives me an hour, but also I just wanted to, if there's parts to interact with folks at, make sure that we do that. For those of you who are new and you're just joining on this Joel 3 video, I have a playlist that has, I believe, 12 videos in it for the book of Joel. There is, I would say, almost a necessity to watch all of that before you watch this, because obviously the book of Joel, the concepts are going to build upon one another, but it is critically important to orient ourselves with the subject matter that Joel is talking about. It is important to orient ourselves with the time when Joel was a prophet so that we can exclude some of the riffraff ideas that are out there. And it's important to understand in the scope of Daniel's prophecy that Joel provides data point 4. And we talked about that in Joel 2. And I have 2 other videos in that playlist that are word studies about that very topic, which I also did in the video of Joel 2. But when you're talking about Daniel's 70 weeks, all 4 data points are locatable in Scripture. Joel 2 gives the 4th data point of the 70 weeks. And what I mean by this is, know therefore and understand the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, Nehemiah 2, in the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes in the month Nisan. Unto the Messiah the Prince, triumphal entry Nisan 10. And then there is the commencement of the 70th week, which is tied to Ezekiel 40, which is why the Jubilee years are important. Maybe people don't understand why the Jubilee years are important, but they are important because that pinpoints the start of the 70th week via the rebuilding of the third and final physical temple, which is Ezekiel. And his vision was given in a Jubilee year to prophesy the future, which will pertain to a Jubilee year as well. And then Joel 2 tells you that 4th data point, which is the ending or the second coming, which is part and parcel with the end of the 70 weeks and the 70th week specifically in the first month. All 4 of the data points relate to Nisan or the first month or specifically Nisan 10. There is a reason for that. So there is much setup work that I did in the videos that were kind of ancillary to the book of Joel to reinforce this point. Many people will still love their Feast of Trumpets or the fall for whatever reason. Okay, like I can only do what I can do. But when we went through Joel 2, I stressed the importance and shared other videos in the Joel playlist that were word studies and that were just good background information about Cyrus and Artaxerxes and Ezra and Nehemiah and the different books and all of that to just help people understand and orient themselves to stuff relating to Daniel's 70 weeks. Daniel 9 on the whole, but to the 70 weeks prophecy, because that's kind of where a lot of attention is drawn. So the book of Joel is critical to that because it provides the 4th of 4 data points. If I didn't overtly state that in Joel 2, which I don't think that I did, I'm stating it now. However, we've moved past that. And my assumption is that everyone has watched all of those videos. And if they haven't, they're going to stop watching this live, but hello. And they're going to go start watching those in the order presented to catch up to speed so that when you get here, you're all like, oh, we're all on the same page. Agree or disagree, we know what I'm talking about. One of the reasons why I presented some of the information that I did to orient ourselves, specifically in the Joel 1 chapters, and the amount of repetition. I know that I repeat myself because I have a tendency to confuse what comes out of my mouth with what's in my head. Like I'll be thinking a thought, and what I say will be like 2 steps ahead or 1 step behind or whatever. So I repeat myself so that if I misspoke, which I do, because my mouth and my brain just operate at different speeds sometimes. So if I misspoke, I can clarify myself when I restate. So that's part of the reason I repeat myself so stinking much, is because I want to make sure that if I did misspeak, that I've clarified myself and stated it correctly at least one other time. However, part of the repetition when I went through Joel 1 was to make sure that we are very stinking clear that Joel is talking about the end of the end times. It has nothing to do with the church. It has nothing to do with the present dispensation, other than there was a data point given in Joel 2 that related to Acts 2 and the sending of the Spirit on Pentecost. But the context with which that was mentioned was New Covenant and the time that Israel will be brought into it when they're spiritually saved, followed by their immediate physical salvation. And it's related to Jeremiah 31. Behold, the days come, say the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers when I brought them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them. But he's going to write his law on their inward parts, write it in their hearts. That is in contrast to the Old Testament law, which was written on tables of stone. So he's talking about the New Testament and the new covenant, the gifts portion of which is the Spirit, which is the law written on hearts. So he specifically talked about the time when he's going to send the latter rain, which is the gifts portion of the new covenant, which is the law written inwardly rather than outwardly. So there was a necessity of bringing that into the conversation to make very clear that the salvation of Israel will be under new covenant, and not in the time when Joel was prophesying, or even he was a prophet like 850s, 830s BC. So it wouldn't be any time remotely during his lifespan or even in the BC era. It would be in the AD era after the new covenant had commenced and at the end of the end days, because the salvation of Israel, the spiritual salvation of Israel, is linked to the physical salvation of Israel. And we talked about this in the context of Revelation 19 about God, the Lamb's wife had made herself ready. The making ready is the spiritual salvation. They call upon the name of the Lord to be saved, which is spiritual. But the blessed are they which are called to the marriage supper, yes, which will happen on earth in the kingdom. But it is the verse that comes before this. It is, let us be glad and rejoice and give honor, for the marriage of the Lamb has come. The marriage of the Lamb is referring to the time when he's going to physically come back and deliver Israel. Israel historically in the Old Testament was God's wife. Please do not confuse the bridegroom with the husband-wife. Husband-wife is always going to be a reference to God and Israel in the Old Testament. The Old Covenant was the marriage covenant that God had with Israel, which is why in Jeremiah 31, when he says, not according to the covenant they made with their forefathers when I brought them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was an husband unto them. The husband-wife is always going to be a reference to the Old Testament and God's relationship with Israel, the Old Covenant being the marriage covenant. The New Covenant is also a marriage covenant, but it's between Christ and the church. And eventually there will come a point when Israel is brought into that New Covenant, which will be at the end of the end days, and it will be immediately followed by the Lord roaring out of Zion and physically saving them to then set up shop and go into kingdom. So when I talked through Joel 1 and I oriented us to what Joel's talking about, he starts off by talking about the locust army, which is trumpet 5 and after. But specifically, the context is the end of the end days, and specifically the day of the Lord, and how that's going to look for Israel's salvation and how that's going to look for Israel's enemies' judgment. That's the overarching theme of the book of Joel. So if we understand that, then we understand what not only what it is talking about, but we understand what it is not talking about. And that is the church or the present dispensation. It's all going to be in the 70th week, and specifically the end of the 70th week, leading up to and including the salvation of Israel and the judgment of the nations. The reason I'm saying that is because Joel 3 starts by talking about judgment for those who divided the land. Now, what we need to understand about this is that there is a prophecy about the land being divided, but it is midpoint, specifically after the midpoint of Daniel's 70th week. And Daniel himself tells us this. There is a great rush to believe that the covenant, the Daniel 9:27 covenant, is a land for peace or a two-state solution, or that it's even the Abraham Accords or something like this. It is not. It is a reinstituted Mosaic covenant, which is why Israel will return to their law, their temple, their sacrificial system, because they're going to return to the Mosaic law and keeping all of their commandments. This is precisely how the covenant was confirmed the first time. Moses read all the words of the book of law, and the people said, "All you have said we will do," and they agreed to it. And then there was the shedding of blood to cement the covenant. I'm actually going to read this. When I wrote my book, Daniel's 70 Weeks, we talked about two specific Jubilee years, which were aside from the commencement of the Sabbath cycles, which lead to the declaration of Jubilee. We talked about Josiah's Great Passover, and we talked about Ezekiel 40. Both of those events, Josiah's Great Passover and Ezekiel's vision, were in Jubilee years, and they were one Jubilee year apart. Josiah's Great Passover occurred in the Jubilee year immediately preceding Ezekiel's vision. And when you combine the events of those two Jubilee years, it gives you a precise outline of what's going to occur in the final Jubilee year and how that's going to unfold. But interestingly, essentially what Josiah's Great Passover served to do was kind of repeat what the people did in Exodus 24. All the Lord has said we will do, and agreed to it, which means that they agree to the judgments if it is not kept, which is part of the reason they're going to go back to it, because it's going to be immediately on the heels of Gog and Magog, which is a massive judgment event. So whether it's to celebrate God's victory on their behalf and honor him, or to be in fear and say we must do this so that he does not do to us what he did to them, regardless of what, the reasoning is they will return to this. Exodus 24. 4. Moses wrote all the words of the Lord and rose up early in the morning and built an altar under the hill, 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the children of Israel, which offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto the Lord. Moses took half of the blood, put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. He took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people. And they said, all that the Lord has said we will do, and be obedient. That is precisely how the 70th week is going to commence, is with the return to the law and the agreement, implicit or explicit. It does not matter, but it'll be explicit agreement to be obedient. All the Lord has said we will do, be obedient, and they're going to rebuild the temple, reinstitute the sacrificial system, and all of that. It's essentially a redo of what happened on Sinai and Exodus and what happened in Josiah's Great Passover in, I want to say, 2 Kings 23. Maybe. And the king commanded all the people, saying, keep the Passover unto the Lord your God, as it is written in the book of the covenant. Yes, that is in 2 Kings 23. So you can read about that. Josiah's great Passover. It occurred in a Jubilee year, the Jubilee year immediately preceding Ezekiel's vision. So when you combine the events of the two Jubilee years and you look at this from a perspective of what's going to happen in the end of the end times, it's essentially Daniel's 70th week is going to be begun by a repeat of the combination of those two Jubilee year events. The rebuilding of the temple and Josiah's great Passover. All the Lord has said we will do and be obedient, and off you go, run into the races with Daniel's 70th week commences with covenant confirmation, which again is the Mosaic covenant. Now, again, part of the reason I wanted to bring all of this up is because there's a misunderstanding of what the covenant is, what the covenant confirmation is. There are a lot of people who believe that the land's going to be divided or a two-state solution or something like that to commence the 70th week. And that is simply not the case. We do read about that occurring. So Joel 3 talks about the judgment for that. So when does it actually occur? Not at the beginning. Joel 3, verse 1. For behold, in those days and in that time when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, it's bring the captives back. I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat and will plead with them there for my people, for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. We know there's going to be a judgment for that in the end times. Absolutely. So when does it actually occur? Because that is the source of contention. It is not at the beginning of the 70th week. It is at the midpoint of the 70th week. Daniel tells us this in Daniel 11. The abomination of desolation is spoken of multiple times in Daniel. The abomination of desolation, not that was committed by Antiochus Epiphanes, although that is spoken of twice in the book of Daniel. Antiochus Epiphanes was a foreshadow of the final beast in Revelation, the end times, who will also have his own abomination of desolation, which is starkly different. There are four times that the abomination of desolation is spoken of off the top of my head in the book of Daniel. In Daniel 7, talking about the little horn that comes up among the 10 horns. This is Revelation 13 imagery. And he says, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom were 3 of the first horns plucked out by the roots. And that's a reference to the lion, the leopard, and the bear, who were the 3 empires. And the little horn is the 4th empire. The beast, the false prophet, and the 10 kings are the 4th beast, who had great iron teeth, devour, break in pieces, stamp the residue with the feet of it. And behold, in this little horn were the eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. That's your abomination of desolation. That is specifically what Revelation 13 says. He was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 40 and 2 months. He opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, as tabernacle them that dwell in heaven. So you get more clarification that the mouth speaking great things outside the book of Revelation. You get more clarification of this being the abomination of desolation in Daniel 7, because it says, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair was like the hair of his head, like the pure wool. I always stumble over these verses because they're not written very readable. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. Judgment was set. The books were open. I beheld them because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. So what you're looking at is Daniel 7 saying he's given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. That's Revelation 13. Revelation 7, a mouth speaking great things. Revelation 13 says a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and then power was given unto him to continue 40 and 2 months. So that's the I beheld till the thrones were cast down. It's 42 months later. Jesus comes back and judges and tosses the beast into, and the false prophet into the lake burning with fire. but you're talking about the abomination of desolation. In Daniel 8, it talks about the same thing. The beast. Through his policy also, he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. He shall magnify himself in his heart. And that's talking about the abomination of desolation also, which relates it to the imagery that we're given in Second Thessalonians 2, which says, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. He's magnifying himself in his heart. So you have a reference to the abomination of desolation in Daniel 7 and Daniel 8. Daniel 9 tells you when it will occur. In the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. And then Daniel 11:36 gives you more clarification as to what the specific abomination of desolation will look like. And this is also compared to 2 Thessalonians 2:4. Daniel 11:36 says, the king shall do according to his will. Yes, the king of the locusts, the angel of the bottomless pit, Abaddon, Apollyon, the beast who ascends out of the bottomless pit and goes about his destruction. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, be given power to continue 42 months, for that is determined shall be done. Then, after the abomination of desolation, which we talked about in 5 different ways, Daniel 7, Daniel 8, Daniel 9, Daniel 11, 2 Thessalonians 2:4, and Revelation 13:5. All of these talk about the same event, putting it at the midpoint of Daniel's 70th week. 3 verses later in Daniel 11:39. So I'll read 37, 38, and 39. This gives us context and orients us to when the land is going to be divided, by whom and for what reason. Not at the commencement of the 70th week, at the midpoint of the 70th week. So talking about the beast, who shall magnify himself in his heart. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate he shall honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. And he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. That is the dividing of the land in Daniel 11:39. And we know that it must be after the midpoint, because Daniel 11:36 is the abomination of desolation, which Daniel places at the midpoint of the 70th week. So while we understand that Joel discusses judgment for the dividing of the land, we must orient ourselves properly to understand when the dividing of the land occurs. There again are a great many people who misunderstand what the covenant confirmation is, what the covenant itself is. What the covenant itself is that is going to commence the 70th week. It is a return to the Mosaic law as discussed. And I've talked about this so many times. Hopefully we do understand this. But obviously there's going to be a judgment for dividing the land. Why? Because it's God's land. This is one of the fundamental premises of the Abrahamic covenant, which we learn by Paul in Galatians 3 is never going to be disannulled. It's never going to be, it's an unconditional covenant. God said, this is my land and I'm going to give it to Israel. So if there are people who seek to take it away from Israel, clearly that's not going to go over well, especially when you're considering that it includes his capital, Jerusalem, where he's going to rule and reign for 1,000 years. So all of this is kind of like biding time until the appointed time, and then God is going to open a can and he's going to deal with those who come against what is his land and his people, and he's going to avenge both. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Yes, and that is the specific day upon which he takes vengeance is the context of this chapter, otherwise known as judgment in the valley of decision, otherwise known as judgment in the valley of Jehoshaphat, otherwise known as Armageddon. So we know that there will be a judgment for people coming against his land and his people. Yes, it's just the when the coming against his land is that people kind of mix up a little bit. It is identifiably at the midpoint of the 70th week. You have the abomination of desolation in Daniel 11:36 and the dividing of the land in Daniel 11:39. So it's going to occur. We just need to make sure that we understand when and why. When I went through the book of Obadiah, which is kind of one of my favorite minor prophet, Joel is definitely my favorite minor prophet by a long shot. I like Obadiah. It's a one chapter book, but it illustrates how God's going to get his back for his people. The judgment of or Obadiah is the judgment of Edom. Edom is kind of special in a really bad way. Edom comes from Esau. And Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated, because Esau sold his birthright for some stew. Well, the birthright included the land and Jesus, the promised spiritual seed. So when Esau turned his back on the birthright, he turned his back on Jesus. He basically eschewed Jesus, the promised seed that was given to the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Should have been Esau, but Esau was like, I don't want it. It's not important. I'd rather have stew. So then Jacob got it. Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated, because Esau hated the promise of the spiritual seed, which was Christ, which was prophesied in the Abrahamic covenant that he gave up. So there's like a little bit of backstory there. But Edom had a perpetual hatred of Jacob. Edom is one of the countries that is going to be destroyed in the events tied to the second coming. We'll leave it at that. In the events tied to the second coming, and Obadiah talks about that. But not only are they ripe for judgment because of all of the perpetual hatreds and bad blood and the way that they treat, must have been some special stew, right? I know. Not only are they ripe for judgment, but Obadiah also talks about when I'm going to read this because it kind of fits into the events of that day and some of why God is going to just he's just going to just where's Obadiah? Hosea, Joel, Nahum, Obadiah. I'm like, sorry, I'm flipping. I'm like, it's a one chapter book, and I'm like, it's got to be somewhere. Obadiah. When in the midpoint of the 70th week, because we know that the midpoint of the 70th week is the abomination of desolation. It's also going to be the flight of the remnant, and for those who don't flee, they're going to stay behind and probably die, which is why Jesus in Matthew 24 says, except for those days be shortened by the flight of the remnant out of Israel, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, the elect being Israel and the remnant specifically, those days shall be shortened by their flight out of Jerusalem, not like 24-hour days being shortened or the amount of days in the 70th week being shortened. It's literally a flight out of Jerusalem that saves them. But Obadiah, Edom is going to be judged in part because shall I not in that day, saith the Lord, even destroy the wise men out of Edom and understanding out of the mount of Esau? And thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed to the end that every one of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter for thy violence against thy brother Jacob. Shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. In the day that thou stoodest on the other side, in the day that the strangers carried away captive his forces and foreigners entered into his gates and cast lots upon Jerusalem, even thou wast one of them. So Jesus is going to allow Edom, Moab, and Ammon to escape out of the hand of the beast during the second half of the 70th week during his conquest, because he's going to deal with them specifically by his lonesome, when he returns at the second coming. Why? Because Edom is going to participate in the attempted obstruction of the flight of the remnant during their time of trouble. When all these people are dividing the land and casting lots in Jerusalem, instead of helping his brother in the day of trouble, Edom is going to try to worsen Jacob's day of trouble, and God ain't having it. So part of the reason that Edom gets left to, there's prophecy. These are all related. And it's not like I wish ill on anyone, but sometimes comeuppance is comeuppance. Daniel 11, the end of the chapter, kind of relates to the conquests of the beast, because he's going to be given power to continue 42 months. He's going to make war with everyone. But it says in verse 41, he shall enter also into the glorious land, Israel. And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. There's a prophecy in Numbers 24 that Jesus is going to take care of those himself. So we're looking at the midpoint of the 70th week. We're looking at the dividing of the land. We're looking at these people who are obstructing, if not trying to thwart the flight of the remnant. Clearly, they're not going to be successful because Michael the archangel and Bible prophecies state they're not going to be successful. But that doesn't mean they're not going to try. That does not mean they're not going to try. But they will get their comeuppance. And that is what Joel 3 is all about, is the gifting of comeuppance to those to whom it is due. I'm going to go to chat real quick before I continue. But these concepts are all just very intriguing to me, and how the Bible, like, really just across multiple books talks about these things. It's all just very fascinating to me. It is. Hi, Dan. Hi, writing. I think I said hi, writing with Jesus, but hello and welcome. Thanks for being here. Hi, Chris DeMello and Cynthia and Raphael and Alicia. Hello, hello. Hi, Brian. Hi, Sean. Obadiah 15. God gives them as you have done, it shall be done to you. Yes. Yes. That is 100% true. Obadiah is a fascinating book. I did go through it in a playlist. It's, like I said, one chapter. I think it's 21 verses or something like that. It's very short. But it is the destruction of Edom. And specifically, it comes out and says, because you tried to hinder, not help, in the day of your brother's distress, and you made it worse in the day that lots were being cast. Well, the casting of lots is part and parcel with the dividing of the land. And that's midpoint of the 70th week. And again, so that comes full circle, is that Edom's participating in that at the midpoint of the 70th week, which is tied to the flight of the remnant and the parceling of the land to whomever for whatever at that point. Doesn't really matter. But this is also specifically why in Revelation 11, where John is given a reed and a measuring rod and told to measure the temple, he says, don't measure the outer court, leave it out, for it is given unto the Gentiles. For the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. So all of these concepts are tied together. There will be a division of the land. There will be, but it will be midpoint, and there's going to be a whole lot of involvement and obviously supernatural hatred behind it. God is going to judge it. He's absolutely going to judge it. That is Joel 3. So I'm glad that you're loving it. I love Bible study. It's so fun. It's so fun. Verse 3 in Joel 3, they have cast lots for my people, have given a boy for an harlot, sold a girl for wine that they might drink. Yea, and what have ye done? Yea, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coasts of Palestine? Will ye render me a recompense? And if ye recompense me swiftly and speedily, will I return your recompense upon your own head? Because you have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried into your temples my goodly pleasant things. Yep. It probably going to take stuff out of the temple for their own use or whatever. That was kind of what the Babylonians did with Solomon's temple once upon a time. Daniel 1 talks about that. So it could be a repeat. I don't know how that's all going to play out. One day they will do it, and we will all find out when that occurs, if we can see from our heavenly abode. Verse 6, the children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Grecians, that ye might remove them far from their border. This is kind of like one of those things too, as it feeds into Matthew 24, because it says, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, the stars shall fall from heaven, the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with the great sound of a trumpet to gather his elect from the four winds, from the four corners of the earth. Yeah, because they're going to be scattered. I mean, that's specifically what Joel 3 is talking about, is at the midpoint of the 70th week, yeah, there's going to be a remnant that flees, that's preserved and protected by God in the wilderness for that time, times it in half, 42 months, 1,260 days. But that's a remnant. What about all of the rest of them that don't flee? They're going to stay behind and die, or they're going to be scattered and maybe sold into slavery or whatever occurs, but they're not going to be staying in their land. And that's what Joel 3 alludes to, is that they're going to be removed far off from their border. That is why, part of the reason why, when Jesus returns at the second coming, he's going to give his angels a command to go gather people whither they have been scattered. That is also the fulfillment of what Deuteronomy 30 says. I think it's Deuteronomy 30. Deuteronomy. It's not. It's Deuteronomy. Yes. Deuteronomy 30, verses 1 through 5. It shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee. Remember blessing and curse, because that's what the sheep and the goats is. He's going to separate people on his right and on his left. And he's going to say to those his right, blessed ye of my Father, blessed ye. It's like, I know just enough to be dangerous, but not enough. What does he say? Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, come ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. And the ones on his left, the goats, then he shall say unto them on the left hand, depart from me, ye cursed. You're talking about the blessing and the cursing. You're talking about the second coming. Specifically, it's a reference to the sheep and goats and those who are living. There's going to be two classifications of the living, saved and not saved, sheep and goats. And the sheep are going into the kingdom, and the goats are going to be the ones that the angels gather out of his kingdom, all things that offend and that much do iniquity. And they're going to be tossed into the outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. It shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse which I have set before thee. I can't read. And thou shalt call them to mind among the nations, whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee. And shalt return unto the Lord thy God, and shall obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children, with all thine heart and with all thine soul, which is like love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, right? Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and be saved. That then the Lord thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations whither the Lord thy God has scattered thee. He will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet to gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. That is Matthew 24:31. It is Israel. And if any of thine be driven out unto the utmost parts of heaven, from thence will the Lord thy God gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. And the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it, and he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers. The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Grecians, that ye might remove them far off from their border. But yeah, he's going to bring them back. Behold, I will raise them out of the place whither ye have sold them, and will return your recompense upon your own head. And I will sell your sons and daughters into the hands of the children of Judah, and they shall sell them off to the Sabeans, to a people far off, where the Lord has spoken it. That's probably talking about something more closely related to Joel's actual time. Now we get to the fullness of the Gentiles. I am not going to do a rehash of the video that I last did. It is the most recent one in the playlist, and it is the fullness of the Gentiles is what? I went through all of this in that video at much greater length. If you have not watched that video, please do yourself a favor and do that, especially if you think the fullness of the Gentiles is a reference to the rapture. It is not. The fullness of the Gentiles is a reference to Gentile judgment. The fullness being the winepress filled to capacity and then stomped. If you have not watched that video, please do it. There are key words in these next verses which discuss the fullness of the Gentiles. And I will just clarify one other point and just trust that if you haven't watched that video, you will go watch it. The fullness of the Gentiles is discussed as an ending point for blindness. There was a prophecy in Isaiah 29 that blindness was going to exist and persist at some point in Israel's future. Future to Isaiah 29 when he was prophesying that. But there was a mystery revealed by Paul because the existence and persistence of blindness was neither given a starting point nor an ending point in Isaiah 29, only that it would exist and it would persist and then it would stop. What you learn about in the New Testament is both the starting point and the ending point. The starting point for the casting of blindness is in Luke 19, which is post-triumphal entry. It's one of the four things that occurred in the immediate aftermath of Israel's rejection of Jesus and the triumphal entry. Luke 19:42, I think. If thou hadst known, even thou at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, the kingdom offering, but now they are hid from thine eyes. For the days shall come upon thee when thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, etc. You have the casting of blindness, the cursing of the fig tree, the prophecy of 70 AD against Israel, and the delay of the kingdom. From the delay of the kingdom, post-triumphal entry, to the second coming, which is like, I'm still going to say triumphal entry number 2, you have blindness. That blindness will persist. It will persist until the end of the 70th week when it will be lifted. Isaiah 29 says that the blind will see out of obscurity and the deaf will hear the words of the book. And they will call upon the name of the Lord to be saved, which is what Joel 2 talked about, to be immediately followed by the physical deliverance of Israel. That is how late in the game Israel comes to saving knowledge, how late in the game the blindness is lifted, to facilitate the spiritual and then physical salvation of them. When you take this understanding into Romans 11, because Paul begins the chapter by saying, even at this time, there remains a remnant according to the election of grace, that were not blinded. And he specifically says he was part of that remnant who was not blinded because he's part of Israel. So if all Israel had been blinded without exception, Paul wouldn't have had a ministry. But he did, because there's always a remnant preserved according to the election of grace. And obviously, the end remnant is proof positive that God always operates by sparing a remnant. So the remnant in the 70th week is no exception to this template that God uses. That's neither here nor there. In Romans 11:25, he says, I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part, triumphal entry, Luke 19, has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And so all Israel shall be saved. That does not occur at the rapture of the church. That occurs at the second coming of Jesus Christ. As it is written, this is what the Romans 11:26, I believe, and 27 go on to say, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob, for this is my covenant when I shall take away their sins. Yes, the spiritual blindness will be lifted. Israel will call upon the name of the Lord to be saved, will be brought into new covenant, and he physically comes back to deliver them and offer them kingdom. Blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in, which is linked to all Israel being saved. And it's linked to, and so it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer. The coming out of Zion of the deliverer is Joel 2:32. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered, for in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord hath said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. So this is talking about the physical deliverance of the remnant of Israel at the second coming of Jesus Christ, which is linked to the fullness of the Gentiles and the ending of the blindness. Again, the lifting of the blindness is the facilitation of the spiritual salvation to be immediately followed by the physical salvation, and so all Israel shall be saved. So the sister passage to that, like Joel 2:32, is what Romans 11 is referring you to. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer. That is Joel 2:32. Joel 3:16 says the same thing. It says, and the Lord also shall roar out of Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. The heavens and the earth shall shake, but the Lord will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. So when you're looking at these chapters and you're saying, okay, there's an ending of blindness and a fullness of the Gentiles linked to the Lord roaring out of Zion, or out of Zion there shall come the deliverer, etc. You're looking for this language. It is found in Joel 3:9 through 13, the fullness of the Gentiles. It is not Gentile salvation, it is Gentile judgment. So these next verses are going to talk about the fullness of the Gentiles, and the Gentile judgment is heathen wickedness filled to capacity and stomped. And so all Israel shall be saved. It's creating a contrast between righteousness and wickedness. And if all Israel is being saved, then who's being judged? Heathen Gentiles. Joel 3:9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles. So there's your Gentiles part of the fullness of the Gentiles, because this is to them. Prepare war, wake up the mighty men. Let all of the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords, your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. This would be akin to exactly what vial 6 is all about in Revelation 16. The sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. And he gathered them into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. They're going to gather in the valley of Megiddo, which is not where they're going to be judged. They're going to be judged in the Kidron Valley. And in that day, his feet are going to stand on the Mount of Olives. The Kidron Valley is down the slope of the Mount of Olives. So they're going to gather in the valley of Megiddo. They will be judged in the Kidron Valley. I wrote about that in my Revelation 19 study. Beat your plowshares into swords, your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen. Ye gather them into the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Gather yourselves together round about, thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get ye down, for the press is full of heathen, wicked Gentiles. The fullness of the Gentiles is literally wickedness filled to capacity, so the Lord can gather and stomp them. And tread the winepress from Basra to the Kidron Valley, the space of 1,600 furlongs, where blood comes up to the horse's bridle. That is the great day of God Almighty. And that is why in Joel 2, it says, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? Well, certainly not the ones he's going to stomp. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get ye down, for the press is full. Fullness of wicked Gentiles. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon shall be darkened, the stars shall withdraw their shining. The Lord also shall roar out of Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. The heavens and the earth shall shake, but the Lord will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. Yea, for that. And the Lord my God shall come and all the saints with thee. So we'll be coming back with him when he does all of this for Israel. And we'll be able to maybe like watch from the sky. And we'll be sitting up there suspended in midair on our horses or something like that. I'm not sure how that's going to work. But we will be watching this while he does this, because Isaiah 63 makes it very clear that he treads the winepress alone. So we are not going to be there assisting him with anything. He's going to be doing this by himself. Isaiah 63, I don't know why, but it is one of my very favoritist ever passages. Let's read it because I like it and it's my video and I can do what I want. So I'm going to read it. Who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Basra? This that is glorious in his apparel, yes, glorious appearing. As lightning cometh from the east and shineth even in the west, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. His apparel will be glorious, because it's the glorified Christ treading the winepress. traveling in the greatness of his strength. I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Wherefore art thou red in thine apparel, and thy garments like him that treadeth in the wine fat? I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me, for I will tread them in my anger and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. For the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed is come. Boom. It's kind of how that's going to go, right? So, yes, the Lord also shall roar out of Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. The heavens and the earth shall shake, but the Lord will be the hope of his people and the strength of the children of Israel. So shall ye know that I am the Lord your God, dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. Then shall Jerusalem be holy, and there shall no strangers pass through her anymore. Strangers meaning unbelievers. Yeah, because all the unbelievers are going to be dead. And all the ones going into the kingdom will be believers. And it shall come to pass in that day that the mountain shall drop down new wine. This is the restoration aspect, because you always have judgment and then reconciliation and then restoration kingdom. And so there's a judgment, reconciliation. Reconciliation affords those being spared from judgment, and then restoration in kingdom. Joel 2 spent a few verses talking about restoration in kingdom. And it shall come to pass in that day, kingdom, that the mountain shall drop down new wine, and the hills shall flow with milk, and all the rivers of Judah shall flow with waters. And a fountain shall come forth out of the house of the Lord, and shall water the valley of Shittim. I'm going to assume, without any research into this at the moment, that this might be referring to the water that's going to flow under the house of the Lord. Ezekiel 47 talks about this. It might absolutely not be talking about this at all. But Ezekiel 47 says, afterward, he brought me again to the door of the house, and behold, waters issued out from under the threshold of the house eastward. For the forefront of the house stood toward the east, and the waters came down from under the right side of the house at the south side of the altar. So that to me reads like that. But again, I have not looked into that, so I could be wrong. But I don't think I am. A fountain shall come forth of the house of the Lord, because that's temple. So that's pretty much what Ezekiel 47 is talking about. But maybe, I'm not sure. Anyway, Egypt shall be a desolation. Yes, because that's what Isaiah 19 talks about. Isaiah 17 talks about the burden of Damascus. Isaiah 19 talks about the burden of Egypt. Yeah, they happen at the same time when the cities of the nations fall in conjunction with the pouring out of vial 7, right before Babylon is destroyed and Jesus comes back at the second coming. So yes, Egypt's going to be a desolation. That is Isaiah 19. And Edom shall be a desolate wilderness. Yeah, Obadiah. Yes, Obadiah. And Isaiah 34. Yes, Edom will absolutely be a desolate wilderness. Yes, is one of two places that will not be inhabited ever again after destroyed. Edom and Babylon. They're both going to be perpetual desolations after their destruction. Yup. For the violence against the children of Judah, because they have shed innocent blood in their land. Yes, that is a true statement. But Judah shall dwell forever, and Jerusalem from generation to generation. For I will cleanse their blood that I have not cleansed. New covenant, for the Lord dwelleth in Zion. That is the book of Joel. It's totally my favorite. Totally my favorite. So, hi, Lori. If I did not say hi, hello and welcome. It is going to be marvelous to behold. But yes, that is the book of Joel. So I will add this video to my playlist. It will be 13, lucky number 13 videos. There's a lot of information that is very, very important and very consequential to the book of Joel that is not actually in the book of Joel, but is very, very consequential to the understanding of just surrounding information, and specifically to obviously the 70 weeks. So that's why the playlist is so extensive, because I would rather throw more information at people than less to help us understand. But one of the things that somebody pointed out in a comment that I have to observe by going through the book of Joel is it takes you to so many other places. So many other places are wrapped up into the book of Joel. It is probably for that reason that it's one of my favorite, because it takes you to so many other books of the Bible and it ties together so many important concepts. I love the book of Joel. Cannot say that enough. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as well. So thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And for those of you who are watching after the fact, I appreciate you guys too. But I wanted to hop on and finish this series while I was thinking about it. So I did not keep everyone waiting on pins and needles. But I wish you guys all a wonderful evening. Take care. Have a good night, a good rest of the week if I don't see you. But I will see you guys later. Take care.